Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans to Success, the podcast which is designed to go into the lives and the stuff that happens before, during, after military and how people transition. And today I've got with me Danny Keating. Hello, Danny.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you again.
And thank you so much for joining me today. So what we've spoken about, it's all going to be revealed during this time we have together. So what I'd like to start with, because it always interests me, what was happening in your life before the military? You know, what made you think you want to go in the military?
Yeah, it's I grew up in North London in a town called Barnet. I come from I guess a fairly sort of humble background, and one of a military one, I guess. My dad was a para that served about 7 or 8 years, had tours of Ireland and Germany, way before having me, but certainly it was always something in the background that I understood as a kid. What the kind of military could bring to you and how it can add discipline and all of those things my dad used to talk about. So it was always there and thereabouts. However, as I grew up, I had no real interest to go off and serve. And I always felt as a child, I always felt quite unsure of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. I was pretty good during primary school at my studies, and then as I entered into secondary school, I guess I lost my way a bit. I fell into the wrong crowd and spent the first 2 or 3 years really not focused on school life, and I think that had a lasting effect throughout the 5 years I was in secondary school. And I actually, when I left school, I decided I left school with about 2 GCSEs. Fortunately, one was in English, and there was another in geography, but the rest were all sort of D levels and above. And I decided to go off and become a car mechanic for a year. I was absolutely dreadful at that. So it quickly become apparent that I wasn't going to make a career out of that. And then spent the next 2 years, up until about sort of 19, 20. Well, up until 19, I spent the next 2 years just drifting around doing various labouring jobs, gardening, and not really knowing what I wanted to do. It was at that point I decided to actually go back to college and do a business, I think GNVQ at the time, just an intermediate business studies. Really enjoyed it, but again, had no idea. It was more the same of just drifting around. Ended up going into working in supermarkets, and about the age of 20, I just realised that something needed to change. I was feeling suffocated in Barnet. I didn't really know what to do. And funny enough, it was exactly the same age as my dad joined the army, feeling pretty much exactly the same. We had a couple of beers and spoke at length about it. And he mentioned one day, why don't you think about the military? And I can remember going up to the career centre with no idea on what was going to be presented to me. I didn't have any aspirations to join the military, but I promised that I would give it a sort of review. So I was in the career centre, saw this big burly sort of tattooed sergeant major in front of me and thought, I'm giving you a wide berth. And there was a guy sat right at the back of the right at the back of the career centre. And I walked over to him, really unassuming bloke, and I sort of got talking to him, asked him what he did, and he told me that he was in the submarine service. He'd been in for about 12 years. This was a draft for a year that he was doing. This was in central London that I was at. And yeah, we had a conversation for about an hour. And by the time I left, I'd signed up pretty much, and had been sold the dream. I mean, it helped that there was a little signing on bonus at the time, which I kind of gladly accepted. But I don't think I really understood what I'd done and the gravitas until I told my mum that I'd signed for the submarine service, and she was quite visibly distressed by the whole idea of me going and spending 3 months in a tin can. But yeah, it was like really one of the best decisions of my life. But it was something I don't think I really fully understood until I got onto the train and actually went down to Plymouth in September of 2001.
Do you like coffee? A lot of people tend to spend money on expensive coffees from outlets without even thinking about it. Well, for the price of just 2 coffees per month, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
And that was when I got to the Plymouth train station, you then like, whoa, what am I doing here?
Right. And I know that we have banter with Army and Navy, and there's the Army and Navy rugby game every year at Twickenham. So your mum was visibly distressed. I mean, had she been married to your dad when he was serving, or did they meet after?
They met after. My dad come back with a bit of PTSD, to be fair. So he was a bit of a mess when he come back from Ireland. He was over for Bloody Sunday and some of those some of those scenarios where the situation in Ireland was quite horrible for a while. So he was a bit of a mess, and my mum patched him back up. So I guess my mum was more concerned that she'd been through this once before, and the whole idea of the patrols, and I had to explain to her that submarines go away for quite a while, and I think to her it was more around the whole idea of not wanting to watch me go through similar things that my dad did, I guess.
Yeah, right. Okay. And how did your dad feel about you joining the Navy rather than the Army?
Yeah, I mean, my dad's always had quite a pragmatic view on it. And I think the way he saw it was a much safer environment to be in modern warfare. He had spent a number of years on the front line, and I guess my dad thought it was a wiser decision. In terms of not being, and particularly at the time, when I joined in 2001, we'd just come out of the Gulf War and terrorism was quite high, and we were involved in skirmishes and conflicts all over. So I think from my dad's perspective, he was very I think he respected and wanted liked the idea. I think the submarine service piece intrigued him. He'd been a para, so that kind of that going to the next level. I don't know what he would have said if I'd have just told him I was going on the ships, but the fact that it was the submarines, I think it kind of intrigued him a bit.
Yeah. So your dad went as high as possible, and you went as low as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that was to keep you away from your dad, or it was just the way it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I don't like heights, so I've always had that banter with him about the fact that I couldn't have done that. And certainly, I took him actually up when we went to Scotland, my first trip. They used to, back in the day, allow parents and families onto to the boats, and we had a family day, and my dad come down, and I remember having a beer with him afterwards, and he said, "Not a chance, never." So it was quite interesting that we've got this complete polar opposite view on height and submergence.
Yeah, well, I've been in a submarine, and I've got to say, like, I don't mind adventure and whatever, but there's no way that I'd want to live for 3 months with a bunch of blokes and women in a small tin can under the water. No,
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So right, so you was had a good meeting with the careers advisor, the Navy bloke who did a secondment for 12 months in London. So you go down to Plymouth, and what's your greeting like? It might be slightly different than "I'm your mother now, who am I?" from a sergeant in the army. So what was it like when you got there?
Well, it was quite surreal. I mean, I had this vision of I'd got into sort of, I guess, arguably wrong crowds when I was drifting for those 2 or 3 years, and I was, part of me wanted to get away from the whole world in terms of Barnet and that London feel, and there was a level of excitement to get away from it all. And quite
Yeah.
funny enough, when I got down um, to Plymouth, we get ushered into the cafe in Plymouth Station, and it's all very nice and calm. And I'm having a coffee, and the first guy that walks up to me and introduced himself, we know each other's best friends and all of that. So I'm like, can't even get away from the place here, and we're still best friends now. Me and a guy called Tim Jackson, aka Jacko. So it was quite funny, but we had a bit of a surreal. I guess it was a bit of a indifferent start to our military career, because the very next morning we had the whole 9/11 attacks. So it was
Yeah.
kind of there was an eerie feel around the naval base, and we went from a very low level of security into I think the highest that we'd been for a few years on naval establishment alongside. So it was kind of there was a level of seriousness across the training staff that we had to sort of contend and deal with in my entry, because of the fact that we were clearly gearing up over those 2 months. The whole temperature of the world was gearing up,
Yeah.
particularly the call for us to go and into Afghan and all of that sort of stuff. And you had the whole Gulf War 2 kicking off as well. So there was a level of there was a level of seriousness in our training, which all basic training you go through, but there was a few reminders that across that sort of training 8 weeks, where you were reminded that you actually were here to potentially go to war, and that it was, but fun at the same time. I don't think for me, the personality, I think the Navy suited me. We had times where we were drilled and it was horrible, but I think that there's certainly, from conversations I've had with pals that have been in the Army and the Marines, there was a level of it was easier, I would say, in the Navy than it
Yeah.
sounds in the Army and so forth.
Well, I mean, there's always that saying that we used to use, and I dare say it's still used today. In times of peace, we train for war, and in times of
Yeah,
war, we fight for peace. And
yeah,
and
indeed.
and I know similar when I was in Germany in the 80s, we had the Cold War, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it could kick off at any time, and we used to have what we called active edge, which would have been probably the same as you would have done with your drills, and it felt like the real deal. Because you got to treat dummy as live and get as real as you can. And unfortunately, on the big FTXs, the big final exercise, and one's building up to it, we did have fatalities, unfortunately, because that's how real it was with the
Oh,
equipment
wow.
using. Yeah. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and of course, in a heightened security situation back after 9/11, that would have really honed into your instructors where we've got to train these guys so they're good enough if it does kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a couple of flashpoints where you really saw that in some of the senior instructors that had, joining in 2001, you still had a few guys knocking around from the Falklands
Yeah.
and so forth that were on 2OE engagements, that extended engagements. So, certainly they they made it very real when you were, when you were pissing about in a training session with 4 or 5 of you.
Yeah.
They made it immediately. They hammered it home as to the level of the sort of seriousness you need to bring into these environments, and how training, and I still carry this sort of mentality into civilian life and in my job now, around sort of building for success, and ensuring that you've got the right skill sets in place now, so that when stuff does happen, you can see, in sales, for instance, predicting the outcomes, working between the now and what could happen in the future, and understanding what the different outcomes, and making sure that you're ready for them, so that anything that comes over, you're always prepared for, I guess.
Yeah, and I always find it interesting when people say, like, civilians generally, they don't understand how military guys, men and women, are just ready if it does kick off, because we train so regularly, and I think that's something that guys bring to business on Civvy Street.
Indeed, yeah.
Because you're just so drilled on processes, systems, techniques, that when you do have to do the job, you could just do it easily and effortlessly.
Yeah, and I always, in my civilian life, I always struggle when people, turn off their emails, or I haven't been able to get back to you because I've got 400, 500 emails building up, and I always struggle with that, because my idea is always to be prepared, always to ensure that you've got enough time to manage yourself correctly, and all of this sort of key skills that you're taught from day one. And it always makes me laugh when you hear people that are so busy that they can't keep up with their own workload, and it's something that I sometimes take for granted, that I've had drilled into me from the age of 20. That the ways of working, which are so transferable, and I think it's something that as veteran military leavers, we take for granted, and don't really realize how transferable some of those skills are that we are taught from day one. Even the nonsense. I never really understood why somebody was checking my bed every morning, right? But you then realize just doing that every day is routine, it's structure, it's all of those things that they just become second nature to you in your working life. It's discipline. So it's it's something that I've massively started to really think about as I move into the later stages of my career and into leadership, and and beyond, how I can help prepare the people that work for me, and the junior guys coming through, how I can help sort of try and transfer some of those skills without having HR issues raised over my head.
Yeah, and that's interesting about Make Your Bed, because on the mastermind program I run, I spend a whole session on Make Your Bed, because it's not about the bed, and it's not about the sheets or the bed pack or anything like that. It's the process, and the fact that at the end of the day, no matter what stuff you've been through, you've got somewhere safe to come back to.
Yeah, indeed, and it's nice made and warm and all that. So yeah, absolutely, I get that.
So so you've gone through training, basic training, and they've got you sub ready, or however you would describe it. But then you get to your first ship. How are you feeling at this point?
Yeah, my first my first boat. So you get drafted before you qualify on the submarine. You have to you do what they call an SMQ wet phase, which is your final test, which is walking around the whole submarine. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It's intense. You start at the front of the submarine, working your way back, and you're with two very senior individuals, and they're just start firing questions. What's that valve? How do you isolate it? What does it do? What pressure air does it comes out of it, etc. And that's all the way from the front of the submarine all the way back. And essentially, you're building a crew where everybody can help every individual, no matter what the situation, no matter what the rank.
Yeah.
If you're in an environment where it's unfamiliar to you, you should still understand how to shut that environment off, isolate it, and make sure the rest of the ship's company are safe. So my first trip was on HMS Vigilant, which was a Vanguard class Trident nuclear submarine based out of Faslane. So at the time, the submarines were split between Devonport and Faslane. So Devonport in Plymouth and Faslane just up on the coast of Scotland. So I didn't really understand. They ask you to pick the submarine you want to go on, and at the time I didn't really understand what I was giving up in Plymouth. So I ended up joining the Vanguard class up in Scotland, and that ultimately became one of the decisions for me to leave 7 years on. Was being stuck up in Scotland, and I struggled up there. But certainly, when I first went up, it was pretty awesome, and I can remember. I've actually got a video of me going to sea the first time, which my mum and dad shot from the Helensburgh coastline. But yeah, we went out, and the first trip was a 3-month patrol, which I think I was underwater, submerged for about 93 days.
Right. That's a first.
Yeah,
that's a first stretch. That. Yeah.
It is indeed. Yeah.
And what sort of? Because obviously I know being in a submarine is pretty secret, and what goes on, you go down to depths where nobody can detect you, or it's very difficult. Yep. So what can you tell us about the lessons it taught you in generic terms? How did you feel when you were down there?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite surreal for me. It was strange just watching how 110 plus men, all because at the time it was just men on submarines. Then, over the years we've started to diversify, which I think is a good thing. But at the time we had 110, blokes essentially from all different walks of life, serving on submarine at the same time, and I was surprised how. Even though you're in a confined space, and even though you're stuck with these 110 people, how at times it was quite solitary, and how you felt alone at times, and they would go through periods where you missed home, and all of those sorts of emotions around what am I doing, 30, 40 meters on the 40 foot under the water, drifting around. And so there were times when I would question it. But I think for me, the biggest sort of lessons I learned immediately was around that idea of sort of teamwork, sort of togetherness, ensuring that, you are absolutely aligned to every potential crisis that possibly could happen. You've thought about, you've understood, and I think, like I said earlier on, that is still something I majorly take forward in my career now. Is trying to, particularly in sales, working in IT sales, always trying to understand the potential outcomes of a deal that we're working on, or a conversation we're having with a customer. And those kinds of lessons were where I started to really harness that way of thinking. But I guess the other thing was just the respect of individuals. I mean, the submarine service is slightly indifferent when you go to sea. Invariably, a lot of the junior officers will drop rank, and you will just be on first name terms, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes very much almost a non-military, militant way of life underwater. You've got the absolute rigor and steel and routine of the military driven into you, but there is also a level of calmness that I never saw outside of being underwater, where every single person in that submarine, and I know it's like this across the military, has got your back, whether you get on with them or you don't. And it's not just having that back; it's also knowing that individual is as highly trained as you are, to do the same job as you,
Yeah,
which was epic.
it's interesting. I picked up on the fact that, and I get where you're coming from. I'm interested in finding a little bit more about your take. Is you said that even though you're on a submarine with 110 blokes, that at times it was solitary. What do you mean by that, solitary?
Yeah, I think for me, the working pattern that we had. At the time I was in the ops center, I went on to become a chef a couple of years down the line when I was in the boats. But for the first couple of years, I was working in the control room, and we used to work 6 on, 12 off at the time. And those 12 hours off, you'd have something to eat. You might get a little bit of a workout. We had a small gym down there, but then you're ending up spending sort of 7 to 8 hours in a bed the size of a coffin almost. It's very, very enclosed. What I saw is a lot of people go within themselves. And the levels of conversation are there, but at times you can feel very alone on a submarine, you always being around people. And I think there's the lack of loved ones and the lack of sort of human connection in your own circles. So and people dealt with that differently. I know guys that would write journals and letters back to their family where they couldn't send them. So there was often times where you would feel alone, and in solitary whilst you were still around so many people.
Yeah, and so you definitely didn't join up to have a walk-in wardrobe then.
No.
I think that'd be fair to say, wouldn't it? Right. So you've, from what you've said, right? You've gone through your training. You're on the submarine. And then I picked up on the fact that Faslane was dynamic at first, but it was probably one of the reasons you actually decided to leave. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think it was a culmination. When I remember speaking to Drafty, and they were talking to me about the options around, the difference between the attack submarines and the nuclear submarines. The nuclear Trident missile submarines. And what I regretted the decision the minute I got up to Faslane was that we had this notion of you could go up to Vanguard class at the time. You got a lot more time off. You would do a 3-month patrol. You'd come back and invariably have sort of 2 months of downtime at home, to recover and recuperate. And it was very almost transactional. You did a patrol and you did, and the idea I got sold on was this idea that you can go and save up and then go on holiday every sort of 3 months and go out with the lads, rather than going on this global tour with a submarine. And and I don't know why, but I kind of got led down that path. And after being up, I'd never lived in Scotland. I'd never lived outside of London apart from those sort of 12 to 15 weeks in Plymouth. And I didn't realise the minute I got to Faslane, I realised how much I missed being in a city, coming from London, and Glasgow. I didn't drive at the time. Glasgow was sort of 45 minutes away on a train, so I didn't realise what an impact that would have on me. Just being stuck on the coast with a row of pubs where everybody knew each other, and it kind of the 2 or 3 years I was up there. I was almost coming home most weekends, as were most Southerners. So we would go up on a Monday or on a Sunday night and then travel home on a Thursday evening, Friday morning, as soon as we could. And you're ending up doing that every week, and it just became quite monotonous and difficult. But I then ended up back in Plymouth, which was great for the last sort of 4 years of my career.
And I know where you're coming from with that, because as you can detect, I'm from the Northwest from my accent, and I finished my career in Kent, and then I stayed in Kent and I became a financial advisor. So I was doing that journey a lot because I had set up business in the Northwest, but my family stayed in Kent, so that was regular every week. And doing that journey even further, Faz Lane, that is some traveling. So I can understand, and I know also, like living in a city like London, moving up to Faz Lane, that'd be a massive difference. And I remember when I was in the army, we used to take the mick out of Southerners and saying, listen, you don't need a passport, to go past Milton Keynes or Watford Gap. You can just travel up there in a car or a train, and there's no immigration or anything. So yeah, so that is a big switch. So you've made the decision to get out now, and what sort of things going through your mind?
Yeah, but I think my decision, I actually made the decision on, I think the 27th of December, 2006. And I'd had Christmas, I'd worked alongside, my submarine at the time was in refit in the docks in Plymouth. And I'd had a good Christmas. My family had come down to Plymouth. We'd really enjoyed it. I'd started seeing a girl in London at the time. So I started just thinking about what I wanted in the future. And I saw a number of you talking about sort of traveling up and down the line and not seeing your kids and, and all of those sorts of emotions. And I started seeing a number of relationships break down and people getting divorced and then not knowing whether to go home or, and it just started making me think about sort of life after the military, whether I wanted a career in the military. And I decided after 7 years, it was probably time to step away.
Hey, do you enjoy sipping a good glass of wine? As you know, sipping too much wine can leave you feeling groggy in the mornings. For less than the price of a good bottle of wine, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joelteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
And I was getting to that period, and I think a lot of people do when you get to 7 years, that's the kind of cut off before you think, well, I may as well do my half pension. And then you get to your half pension, you're like, well, I've only got another 12 left or 11, and I may as well crack on and do. So I decided 7 was going to be it. Otherwise, I would end up doing 12, and then who knows, the full engagement. So that was kind of my main decision. I didn't know whether at the time I thought about just going traveling and just really, I guess the cliche is to go and find yourself. I was 27 at the time, sort of thinking I didn't really need to make any crucial life decisions. And then it was just by chance, as I mentioned earlier on, I changed to become a chef in the Navy for the last 3.5, 4 years. I saw an incredible rise through the ranks. I was promoted from sort of junior chef to leading chef, running my own kitchen on a nuclear submarine within 12 months of actually taking switching and doing basic chef training. So that was one of the quickest promotions at the time, and so I saw that and thought I wanted to follow a career in food. I had a passion for it, and decided to go to university to do a food marketing degree in Birmingham. So I did that for 3 years. So I moved out of Plymouth, and actually the Navy were pretty good. They let me leave 4 months early to go to university. So I put a case in, and my officer at the time, he was a logistics officer. He was really good to me and let me leave in the September. I wasn't due to leave until the December. So actually it was probably 7 months notice. But they were grateful. They were great to me. And yeah, I left, and what was going through my head? Yeah, it was. I never forget the day that I handed my ID card. Like a lost sense of identity. You know, that safety blanket being ripped around you. It's all I'd known, pretty much. You know, I'd had this rough life from sort of 16 to 20, where I was sort of getting into the wrong things and doing the wrong stuff. And then all I'd known is that safety blanket of the Navy.
Yeah.
You know, you've got guaranteed income coming in. You've got. I was living on base at the time, so I had 3 square meals a day, and all of that sort of stuff that you become reliant on. And a network of friends that were extended. You know, we could go drinking whenever we wanted to. I played football on Wednesday afternoons, and you know, all these things. So I guess the only saving grace was going to uni. Kind of ushered me into an environment that was. I've laughed and joked a few times and said, look, you know, the the Navy at times was like university, but you just got paid. You know, you had the nights out, you had the laughs, you know, the camaraderie between different groups of people and the age groups and so forth. So it felt like, because I went on and played rugby for the uni straight away, so it was kind of, it felt like I just went from one unit to another, and that was pretty good. But yeah, certainly it was good for me to have a plan. I don't think I would have done well coming out going traveling. I think it would have not been good. Similarly, I've known people to leave the Navy without really a plan, just because they're pissed off with it, and you know, and angry with a decision that had been made. And I think that's where, for me, sometimes service leavers make the mistake of not really thinking about, and I know it's difficult to think, but you've got sort of that 12-month period to really digest and think, what do I actually want to do next? Do I want to change my career completely? Do I want to do something that's similarly tied into the jobs that I've had within the military? And I don't think service leavers really fully, I think actually the military does a bad job when we're going through that sort of redeployment training of really looking at how transferable our skills are into other industries that necessarily they necessarily wouldn't put themselves into, like the IT industry for me.
Well, yeah, because that's an interesting point. Because there's a few things that I observe is when you go into the military, they spend 6-12 months taking the civilian out of you and then building you up as a soldier, sailor, or airman, woman. And then when you come out of Civvy Street, they don't take the military out of you; they just pop you out at the end. And also, if there's any bitterness in the person, the leaver, because of a particular experience which made them sign off, sometimes they're taking that baggage into Civvy Street, which isn't conducive to success, is it?
No, not at all. I can remember one officer telling me that I'd be back within 12 months and I wouldn't amount to anything, which was really constructive. And
that was a good pep talk, then.
Yeah. And you know, he was basically saying that most people fail, and I'll be back within 12 months, and you know, see you on a submarine soon, and you know, all of those things. Which helped drive me. But I do think that there's an element of arrogance that I found as I was leaving, as to this is the only world for you, and there's nothing out there for service leavers. And I think, you know, whether you've done 4 years or 20, you should be incredibly proud of having done your time. But I think there could be more support out there for service leavers of you know, whatever time spent in the military.
So thank you for that. And so you get out, you're standing, we're outside Plymouth, is it?
Yeah.
You've just handed your ID card in, you've gone to uni, you've lost your identity, and then fortunately uni is sort of structured. Well, it is structured, maybe in a different way, but it helps you then bond with different people in different places from different cultures and different areas of life. And so you're on this food marketing course, taking a degree, which is interesting because I know what you do now, and it's nothing to do with food. So,
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I left uni at 30. Well, about a month before my 30th birthday. So I was born in June. So I passed with a 2-1 in my degree, and thought, what am I going to do next?
Oh, well done.
Thank you. And I took a couple of months off. Had my 30th birthday, and kind of started to assess. I thought about, I wanted to go into some kind of new product development chef role type thing, where you go and work for a manufacturing organization that develops new products and takes them to market. And I started looking at the jobs, the career path, the money associated to it, and just thought, it's going to take me a very long time to get to where I kind of thought I could get to. And there was an air of realizing that I didn't have the time as necessarily as a uni leaver that would be sort of 24, 25 that could have that. So I was starting to look over my shoulder a little bit and thinking, even though I was 30, that, I had to try and find a career that I could push on quickly and have potentially access to sort of uncapped earnings and all that sort of great stuff. So I went to work. And by the way, I was also applying for lots of jobs in the food industry and falling short in many ways.
Falling short. How was that?
Just for some reason, I wasn't being picked up. I can't quite understand. I felt I had a good story to tell, having the military background, having gone to uni, having been a chef. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't land a job. And I'd only been going about a month, but I just thought, right, this is new. I'm going to try something different here. And I went to a company called Pareto Law that specialised in graduate recruitment, where they look at taking sort of 20% of candidates. They run these recruitment days. And I went along and kind of found the niche there, because I was up against a lot of sort of 23, 24-year-olds. I had a story to tell. It was a lot different to others.
Yeah.
And I realized the IT industry actually loves service leavers, and it's something I hadn't really thought about. So they specialized in sort of IT sales, all the way ranging from security cameras all the way through to complex IT solutions. So I did 2 recruitment days for them, got through, and then got offered 3 roles, and one of them was in Essex. When I met the leadership, it was in a sort of tech startup, specializing in Oracle at the time. They did consultancy and managed services. So to whom I'm still close and friends with, 2 or 3 of them, and one of them, Matt, is sort of a close ally, and probably would list him as a mentor of mine. So I went and joined them for nearly 8 years, and relocated to Chelmsford in Essex, and never looked back.
Fantastic. So you're still down in Chelmsford now?
I am, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it well. I used to work there for a short time. So yeah, good. And you're talking about networks and mentor coaches. How important do you think it is to start building your social and business network when you get out, and also to get yourself coupled with a mentor coach sort of relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I learned actually in the Navy. My officer at the time, Mike Roberts, who was a lieutenant, he was very big on anybody that he thought was sort of up and coming talent. He would pair us with other individuals on the submarine around mentoring. So that's where I first started seeing the idea of a mentoring sort of system. And one of the things I quickly learned was try and strip away, and I've done this throughout my career, anybody I've worked with management wise, I always look for the good and bad in what I think about those individuals, and try and take as much of their good qualities out into my ethos. So I kind of some of my bosses have been by proxy mentors without them even realizing, you know, because I'm stripping away. But I soon realized after sort of the first year that I was developing quickly, probably too quickly. I had a bit of an air of arrogance with me in the first year or two within my sales career, and I think the directness of the way that military teaches you to speak to people sometimes can be often confused as arrogance and rudeness in the civilian world. And it's in times of crisis or times of when things need to get done, you just like just do it, and we'll talk about how rude I was to you 2 days later. But I did notice that, so I started reaching out to a couple of individuals that I respected inside of Oracle, who were one was ex-military and the other wasn't. But I started meeting those regularly, just sitting down, talking about my career, where I wanted to go, which then was helping build my network out. and look, I think mentoring is probably, particularly, I've just signed up actually for a mentoring program and to act as a mentor for ex-military folk. And I think it's hugely important that, and probably a missing piece of the sort of service leaver environment, is that I think all of us as service leavers that are in sort of whatever industry should be giving back and helping veterans sort of step into their next career roles. But for me, it's been probably the most important thing in my career is to constantly have somebody or people throughout my roles to ideate and to challenge me and to sort of push me into sort of helping me make decisions.
Great. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I've established this podcast, because what is always coming through is that the peaks and troughs, challenges, successes that go on throughout the life cycle of before the military, in the military, and after the military, and also about the closeness and what you get from having a buddy system, effectively.
Yeah.
That's what a mentoring or coaching program is. It's a buddy system, like the officer Mike Roberts taught you about, and actually paired you up. So where are you now in your journey to success? Because I know you've got a few things on the boil. So what's next for you?
Yeah, so currently I've just joined a sort of a long-standing startup that's just been relaunched under a guy called Stephen Kelly, who's former CEO of Sage. I had a conversation with him back in June, and he mentioned that he's sort of starting this exciting project, and has asked me to come over to help build the alliances and relationships. So I've had quite a sort of a bouncy career in sales and in IT. I've jumped between direct sales, and I found my home probably over the last 4 to 5 years working in sort of more business development and building out partnerships and alliances. And I think for me, that's where I'm truly leveraging some of those really fundamental skills that I learned in the military. For me, what's next is to hopefully take Serato, who I'm working for, into sort of I don't know, an IPO or some level of sort of buyout from a major organization, but to certainly work for the next 3 years, helping this realize sort of hyper growth in terms of what we do. Aside from that, I'm working with Rise by Barclays, who are a fantastic initiative for fintech startups, and helping them do sort of mentoring and skill sets. I've just been invited onto Tech London as an advocate there as well to help sort of lead thought leadership around the IT industry, and also sort of playing around with ideas in my head around sort of becoming a consultant over the next year or two and starting my own practice, helping startup organizations with the idea around business development and building meaningful relationships in the community. I think from an IT perspective, what we see now is the need for organizations to partner with other organizations and take solutions to customers rather than just single-handed products. So that's I guess that's me in a nutshell at the moment, is just continuing the journey. Look, I've got aspirations to become sort of more of a NED-based sort of non-exec director in a number of companies over the next few years. But the other side of it is, you know, which is huge. I think I said to you the other day about reconnecting. I've kind of shied away from my military connections for a number of years. I don't know why. It's probably something I could probably do with some counselling on or something like that. But yeah, for a number of years, I kind of stepped away and didn't really focus on that aspect of my life. But it's something that's become hugely important to me over the last year. So another thing that I will be doing over the next year is hugely focus on how I can give back into the sort of veteran and military community.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And what I do want to know, like, it's the Columbo question, I suppose. Oh, just one more thing. What is the one tip that you would give someone who is either leaving the military and going to have to transition to Civvy Street, or has left the military and maybe struggling, or has left the military and is a veteran who's really doing well? What's the one tip that you would give them for any situation that would help improve their lives?
Yeah, I think probably a couple, actually. One being speak to other sort of veterans and service leavers. I had a great call with a guy that reached out to me who's in the US the other day, and a guy called Dan, and you know, we've never met before. He reached out to me on LinkedIn and just said, look, I'm moving back to London. I've got no idea where or what to do next. You know, can I pick your brains for half an hour? And I think people underestimate that, and you know, it's quite easy to run a search on LinkedIn to find people, and I think more often than not, you would find that military personnel or ex-military personnel would be willing to give half an hour of their day up to talk about and help ideate what potentially you could do. But I also think for service leavers, I think it's vitally important to have some kind of a plan of what you want to do next, and to understand what the pathway is to success there, whether it's, you know, whether you want to go off to be a plumber or somebody in IT or a brain surgeon. You know, what do I need to get? Where do I need to go? Who do I need to speak to? Are there any ex-military peers in that environment that I can reach out to and understand how they got there? But I think for me, the individuals that I've seen struggle when leaving the military have been the ones that have left because of an argument or because of some kind of altercation, and they haven't sort of given themselves enough attention. I think, you know, the resettlement centres aren't going to do that for you. So for me, the one thing that I saw was that you've got to take the bull by the horns and steer your own destiny rather than relying on individuals in the careers centre or the resettlement centre to do it for you.
Fantastic. So that's brilliant. So I love the story. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I think that you've got so many big plans, which is fantastic. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed having a chat and chewing the fat about you before the military, in the military, and then after the military. And yeah, exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and appreciate it. And look, if any of your listeners want to contact and reach out and talk, then I'm more than happy to engage.
Yeah, that's. Have you got any way they can contact you? What's the best way they can contact you?
Probably via LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Otherwise, happy to share my email details on the back of this as well.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. Take care and have a brilliant day.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's joelteams.com, JOETEAMS, joelteams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.